Okay, hi guys. So today's podcast topic comes out of last episode. I'm trying to remember why it even came up. Oh, I was talking about how I get really bad or I was getting really bad task immobility in my corporate job and how that's been a lot better since I started doing content creation for my career. And I regrettably, I realize now, cut this part out because the episode is getting too long. But I said, like, I know it sounds like I have ADHD. I just haven't gone through the motions of getting a diagnosis because of my health insurance situation, which, by the way, a bunch of you did message me with advice on how to figure out my health insurance, which I haven't done yet, but I'm very grateful for the advice. I feel like I'll be able to figure it out now. I got so many comments of people being like, girl, it sounds like you have ADHD, or like I have ADHD and I experienced the exact same thing. I actually originally was going to talk about this in a podcast episode about procrastination. I think I asked on my story like literally a year ago for you guys to vote on podcast topics, and procrastination won. And then I just never did the procrastination episode, which tells you a lot about my procrastination issue. I didn't think I'd be able to make that episode without talking about potentially having ADHD. And I was like, well, I don't want to like talk about that if I don't even have an answer. And even for today's episode, I was like, if I am gonna talk about whether or not I have it, I should like do the proper research, right? I didn't do the research, honestly, just because I was lazy and I didn't feel like it. But B, like the little research I did do, I feel like there's so much just like inconclusive stuff on ADHD. Like, for example, they know it's like linked to dopamine levels, but they haven't identified like any cause and effect. And so I was like, I don't really want to like read something and then misinform. So I'm just going to talk about this based off what I already know, which isn't much, but I'm not a doctor or a mental health professional, so I don't want to start talking about the science of it when I don't actually know anything. And I do want to start off with the disclaimer. I really dislike the trivialization and like over-diagnosing of like mental disorders. Like I hate when people say like, oh, I'm so OCD about this, or I'm so ADHD, when they just mean that they're like very particular or like they, are a bit scatterbrained. Like, don't throw those words around. They're actual disorders. And I think that's why I was like hesitant to talk about this. You shouldn't say you have something until you've gotten like a formal diagnosis. For me, it's just something where I've like really gone back and forth. And at the end of the day, like I feel like all like mental disorders are things that everyone experiences to some degree. It's just like it becomes a disorder when it's like more extreme. And so it's been very easy for me to like convince myself that I have it, but also convince myself that I don't. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about like sort of what my journey has been, even though I still don't have an answer, obviously, because I haven't gotten a diagnosis. And so last night I was trying to like think back on my childhood and be like, oh, what was the first instance of me like struggling with procrastination or feeling like something might be wrong with me? Honestly, like when I was young, like primary grades, like 1 through 3, I feel like nothing was wrong with me. Like teachers didn't notice anything about me. I had no issues focusing. I performed well academically. And that was also the time when I wasn't allowed to like use the computer. The internet was like on this internet card that my parents would like not let us have. We didn't have cable, so I didn't really watch TV, and I didn't have a phone. I didn't get a cell phone until my senior year of high school, actually. And so I was like, oh, like back when I had no digital distractions, I wasn't really struggling, so maybe I don't have ADHD and I'm just like a chronically online, easily distracted Gen Zer, right? But then I remembered this instance in 5th grade. We had this like paper project thing called Transforming America. It was like one of the biggest assignments of the year. And we basically had to pick a topic and talk about like how it transformed American history, right? I remember I picked Dr. Seuss because I wanted to be different. A, honestly, probably because I'm like a pick-me. B, I knew like everyone was picking stuff like the Gettysburg Address, right? And I was like, I already know my teacher has had to read like 4 million papers on the Gettysburg Address over the years, but no one had ever chosen Dr. Seuss. So I was like, whatever I say, it's probably going to seem insightful and interesting, which is honestly like really great strategic thinking from a freaking 5th grader. But yeah, my thing was like about how he transformed like American children's literature, which he actually did. Because before Dr. Seuss, it was like, see Dick run, run Dick run, or whatever the fuck they say in those books. And why did I bring this up? Oh, I think we had like milestones, right? Because this was back when they would help divide your bigger assignments into like smaller deadlines, something that I need someone to still do for me now. And so we had like, oh, choose your topic, choose your sources. But like the first big kind of deliverable was like the rough draft of your paper. And I have this core memory of me like sitting in my room working on this. I think like at 10 p.m. or something. I think I was working on it in secret because I'm pretty sure like I wasn't allowed to be up that late in 5th grade. And I wrote the entire thing in one sitting the night before. And I remember it was like already the day before this thing was due. Everyone else had been writing theirs for like weeks. And I couldn't even bring myself to start until like late at night. I mean, honestly, if my mom found out, she would have gone so... Sorry. I just thought of an earlier occurrence. Okay, I feel like I'm getting very off topic here, but in, I think, 2nd grade, we had to do one of those like stupid kind of like crafty assignments where we had to build a leprechaun trap. It was like one of those things where you like use a shoebox and then you're supposed to like build it and like explain. Obviously it's not going to be like advanced mechanics because we were 2nd graders, but like, oh, you know, the gold is here and then they step here and it traps them. And we had weeks to do this, and I knew that like I was gonna need my mom to like take me to the craft store or like help me find the supplies for this. And for weeks I was like, I need to tell my mom about this assignment so that I can start it. And I just couldn't do it. And I remember I didn't tell her until the night before. And I feel like this is a meme format. Like when you tell your mom the night before an assignment is due that you need to go to the craft store and she's like mad as fuck at you. That was literally me. She was like, why did you not tell me earlier? And I ended up building like a really bad leprechaun trap, but I don't think it had major repercussions because I was in 2nd grade. It definitely started becoming more of an issue when I got to like middle school and high school because suddenly you have unit exams which cover like weeks of content and you're supposed to study ahead for those. Or, you know, you have like bigger papers that you're supposed to work on ahead of time. I knew like my procrastination issue was like a little bit worse than my friends, but at that time I really chalked it up just to like self-discipline. I was like, oh, like this is nothing wrong with me. Like everyone naturally procrastinates. Like I am just like not good at like being hard on myself and getting myself to like sit down and do the thing I have to do. And honestly, like it should have been easy for me too, because again, I had no phone and our like computer that we used was downstairs. I didn't have like a laptop in high school. So it's not like I could just be like watching movies, you know, like my parents were like monitoring what I was doing. I still procrastinated a lot, but the extent to which I could get away with it was like less so, right? Because again, like a unit exam is like maybe like a month's worth of content. So when you get to like a final, at least I've been tested on this content periodically. I'm not like being tested on like an entire semester's worth of stuff. College was when I started to realize like, okay, I am struggling with this problem to a degree that is definitely more severe than others. And I do think neurodivergence and undiagnosed ADHD is pretty common among like overachieving students. I saw this meme that was like, it's crazy how you get good grades and they just let you raw dog ADHD for the rest of your life. There are so many kids who definitely like don't have normal like focus patterns or study habits, but because they're smart enough to get the scores, there's no sort of like alarm bells to like let anyone know that something's wrong, right? I feel like I was always like surrounded by people who kind of struggled with the same thing. So I was like, oh, this is normal. But my best friend freshman year of college, she is, I think, very like neurotypical when it comes to like studying and like focus and stuff like that. Like we would study together and she would like literally sit down and do the thing she had to do. And I was like, whoa, people can do that? But I was like, wow, we're like very, very different. And I started to feel like I don't think this is a difference in like effort or discipline. Because what you need to understand about me is like I was like such a try-hard student. I cared so much about my grades. So I wasn't like out partying and like not working ahead on things or like not studying ahead on things. Like weeks before an exam, I would be sitting in the computer lab. I would say no to the social engagements and be like, I need to study ahead. But no matter how many hours I sit there, even if it's like by myself, I was just like not studying or like getting things done until literally right before they were going to happen. Like I think every single paper I wrote in college, I wrote in like the last 12 hours before it was due. Not even the last 24 hours. Like if it was due at 9 a.m., I would be writing it still at like 3 a.m. And in terms of exams, I mean, the semester system like was really not ideal for me because we basically like get tested on content like midterms, finals, like twice the whole semester. And it's not even like, oh, I need to start reviewing the content. Like the lack of urgency meant that I didn't even learn the content. I was like falling asleep in class. Obviously, like the concepts build on top of each other. So like I didn't learn the first unit and then I just didn't know what was going on for like the rest of the semester. And so I was like dead ass like opening lesson 1 and being like, let me learn this entire semester's worth of content right now, like just like teach it to myself. I was doing this like literally in the last like 24 hours before the exam. Like I would sleep like maybe like 1 or 2 hours and I would take like 7 practice tests back to back, like just lock it and sit there for like 20 hours straight. It was genuinely so unhinged. And the running joke is I keep calling myself an academic weapon, but like the fact that I could do that and like be a straight A student at Penn was actually insane. The thing is though, like I was still really fighting it at this time. Like I still was like being really hard on myself and being like, why are you like this? Just being like so frustrated because I'm like, why can't I just not do this to myself? Like I'm literally torturing myself. If I could just split up this work over like a series of days and a series of weeks, I wouldn't be, you know, in physical pain from sleep deprivation. Towards like the last 2 years of college, I started to accept it a little bit more. I still didn't think like I had, you know, ADHD or like a disorder or something, but I just was like, this is not a thing about myself that I seem to be able to change through like sheer, you know, will. So let me just kind of embrace my study cadence. And so like reading days, which is like the last week when you don't have classes, like before finals, when everyone's studying, I would literally like start studying at like 10 p.m. and study until like the sun went up, like 6 a.m. and then sleep from like 6 a.m. to noon. And I was on this like semi-nocturnal schedule, which was like really unhinged. But the alternative, because before I would start my study day at like 9 or 10 a.m. like a normal person and then not get anything done until 10 p.m. and then study until 6 a.m. and then it's like, when do I sleep? You know? So at least I was like, okay, with this schedule, I'm still like sleeping like a normal person. I'm just studying when everyone else is sleeping. I started to realize that I probably realized this actually like earlier in high school. I definitely have this like higher level of focus that I am only able to unlock in certain situations. And this doesn't just apply to studying, like also for taking tests, taking the SAT in high school, right? I did like this thing called Elite. It's like this insane boot camp thing that like all the try hard kids at my high school did. And my mom has this saying that like her dad, my grandpa used to say to her a lot, which if you translate it from Chinese, it's basically like, if you always take the practice exam like it's the real exam, then you can take the real exam like it's a practice exam. The whole idea being like when you're, you know, getting ready for something, take it really, really seriously. And then you can just like be chill and kind of like lock into your routine when you go into the real thing, right? And not have to like deal with anxiety. I am like the living, breathing, walking antithesis of that idea. I just feel like my brain knows when it's not the real thing. And like, I'll still do well on practice tests, but I will always do better on the real thing. Like, I don't know if any of you are going to get this reference, but like in the manga slash anime Naruto, like he has this like 9-tailed fox mode. It's like this godlike mode. That's literally what I feel like happens to me when I take standardized tests. I like go into the real deal and I just unlock this like other dimension of my brain. I mean, the same thing happened when I took the GMAT, which is like the kind of like equivalent of the SAT for business school. Not that I ever applied or went to business school, but I did like take the GMAT my second semester of my senior year at Penn just to get it out of the way because I like was only taking 2 courses that semester. This is like the SAT. Like you don't cram for the SAT. Have you ever heard of someone being like, oh, I pulled an all-nighter to cram for it's a standardized test. Like it's not testing knowledge. It's supposed to just test your intelligence. And I literally had months and months to prep for this. Like I had these books. Like the only section that I was struggling with was the math section. I am very much a humanities girly over a STEM girly. So that was like the one part I was prepping for. I think I did the entire math workbook, which is like, you know, thick, in one day, maybe 2. And then you can like buy this set of like practice tests from the GMAT site, because it's like an iterative exam where like they give you like harder or easy questions depending on if you get the questions right. So it's kind of like hard to take a practice test that isn't like pre-coded to do that. So I think it came with like 6 or 8 practice tests, and I literally took them all in like the last day before the GMAT. And I stayed up studying until like super late at night, maybe like 4 or 5 a.m., got a few hours of sleep, and then went in and took the exam at like 8 or 9, which is like truly the opposite of what everyone tells you to do for an exam like that. I'm not gonna tell you my score, but I did really well, and I did way better than I ever did on a practice exam. I truly don't think I can reach that level of performance if it's not the real thing. The same way I don't think I can like reach that godlike level of focus unless I know that the deadline or the exam or whatever is like right around the corner. Like I need that sense of urgency, and I can't seem to instill it upon myself. Like it has to be an external thing. So I finished college. My grades weren't as good the last 2 years because I do think I like really pushed the limits of my procrastination. I mean, partially it was also because like I had my internship at Goldman, like I wasn't as stressed about my grades, but also I feel like each time I got away with like finishing something super, super late, I would kind of like crush the timeline even more. Like freshman year, I was probably studying like the last 1 to 2 days before the exam. And then it started becoming like the last 12 hours before the exam. Like it'd be the day before the exam and I still wouldn't feel the urgency and I still couldn't lock in. And the classes also naturally got like harder and more conceptual, where it became a lot more difficult to try and like learn the content in the last 12 hours. So yeah, there were definitely situations where my procrastination, I wasn't getting away with it. I wasn't enough of an academic weapon. So maybe I'm not an academic weapon after all. Sorry, guys. But I graduated Penn, and then I started my investment banking career at Goldman. And in hindsight, like I totally understand why I love that environment. I mean, it was like really familiar to me because it's like, you know, high strung, competitive, surrounded by like really smart, try hard people. That's kind of what I was used to. But also the nature of being like an investment banking analyst is you get these tasks and you kind of have to do them immediately. Like you're like turning comments or like you're making a deck or whatever. But everything is like usually kind of urgent, and you have like an insane amount of work to get through. So you just kind of do it as soon as you get it. And you also have to understand that like there's just like this level of stress when you first start out as an analyst and you don't have your footing yet, especially if you're someone like me where like I went in with a lot to prove. I feel like I've talked about this in my like very first podcast episode from a year ago. Goldman had a 50-50 gender hiring policy. There was this sort of like impression that the women they hired weren't as technically qualified. And so I just went in with like a fire under my ass and I had a lot to prove. Dude, in hindsight, I don't know how I lived like that. I was like, had such a stick up my ass the first few months. Like if one thing went wrong at work, I genuinely felt like my life was over. I like thrived in that environment though. Like in terms of thinking back on my life and like when I didn't deal with like my procrastination issue, Goldman was probably like my golden, not even Goldman, just like the first 6 months at Goldman was like my golden years because I really didn't struggle. I also was in the office all the time. Like I was in the office from probably like 9 a.m. to earliest 10 p.m., latest like 4 a.m. most days, often on the weekends. And we had cubicles when I was an intern, but I think by the time we were full-time, we had like the bullpen, which is, it's like more of an open layout. Like you're not like fenced off from other people, so everyone can see your screen. You couldn't really fuck around, you know? I also think like that environment is just conducive for people with ADHD or people who are like neurodivergent, because a lot of my coworkers also were like, oh, I think I might have ADHD, or had like very ADHD tendencies. The first 6 months, great, grand, wonderful, not sleeping, but I was thriving. And then COVID hit. We went into lockdown. That was like a big thing because I wasn't in the office anymore and I wasn't like surrounded by people. And that made like doing my work on time really difficult. But the other thing that made it really hard was like I kind of got my footing and like knew what I was doing at work. And once you get to that point, like you have a grasp of when things are actually urgent. And so I knew like certain things I got assigned, as long as I got them done like in 2 or 3 days or like by the end of the week, it'd be fine. I didn't have this, I need to do this immediately kind of feeling. And that's when things started to really fall apart, because it'd be like, oh, I just need to have this done by like Friday morning. And then it would be Thursday night, like 3 a.m. And I'm like struggling to get myself to do this thing. And basically, like, as the timelines got longer, my procrastination and like not being able to do things until the last second, that issue from college that I'd kind of forgotten about, resurfaced in a really big way. And it's funny because I spent a lot of lockdown living at home with my parents, right? And I started noticing like, my dad seems to struggle with some similar issues, because my dad also used to be in office full time, and he had like a 9 to 5 job. Like, you know, he wasn't like working crazy hours. I rarely saw him working at home. During the pandemic, first of all, I would go downstairs sometimes to his office, like his home office, and I'm like, you're like fully watching like a documentary on polar bears right now. Like, you're not giving a working vibe at all. And then I would see like his light still on downstairs, like working at like 1 or 2 a.m. And we know that means it's because he didn't get his work done during the day, okay? It's not like he suddenly has an insane workload. I feel like what really solidified it was, this wasn't during lockdown. I think my mom was complaining about this to me like maybe like a year or two ago, but they do like Bible study, right? And they have homework that's like due every Sunday morning. And she was like, I always tell your dad to finish his homework during the week, like before Saturday, so that we can spend Saturday like doing fun stuff because it's the weekend. And every single week, Saturday comes around and he hasn't done his homework, and he doesn't do his homework until like Saturday night. And my mom, I think, is like the opposite. Like, her task execution, task completion skills are like freaking goals. If she needs to do something, she just sits down and does it. So she clearly had like no empathy for my dad. And I was like, no, you have to understand, like, he really does want to finish his homework before Saturday. Like, it's not his fault. I had floated the idea of like me having ADHD to my parents during the pandemic, because this was also the time that I got on TikTok, and, you know, very questionable that I'm learning about mental health stuff through TikTok. But before videos about ADHD showed up on my algorithm, like, my impression of ADHD was like, oh, it's that like boy in like first or second grade who like can't sit still and like can't sit through an exam, and it's just like running rampant. And obviously, like, I thought that had nothing to do with me. But I started seeing videos like, oh, if you have like really bad procrastination, if you feel immobilized and like can't do things without time urgency. And I was like, this is sounding kind of familiar. And so, you know, I had like brought up this idea to my parents, and it's so funny because my mom's like, no, that's totally normal because your dad's like that. Like, you're fine. And I'm like, does that mean that I'm fine, or does that mean that dad and I both are not fine? Because I do think like whatever ADHD, not ADHD issue I have is definitely, if genetic, coming from that side of the family. I still had like a lot of imposter syndrome about it, because at the end of the day, I said this earlier, you know, procrastinating, having trouble doing things you don't want to do, getting distracted and scrolling on your phone instead of like doing your work. Like, those are all just extremely normal things that everyone struggles with. So if you want to gaslight yourself into believing that there's nothing wrong with you, it's very easy to do. And I think what actually gave me a lot of validation, this is so random, I had like the shortest situationship ever with this like guy. I became really close with his sister. Actually, I think I've talked about this in my situationships episode, but he was like, oh, you should meet my sister because I feel like you guys would get along. And he kind of played himself with that one because it's been like 3-4 years and we're still super, super close. And I see why he wanted us to meet. We're different, like very different in some ways, but we are extremely similar in some ways. Like, she is addicted to sewing. I mean, I also sew, but like addicted to sewing the way that I'm addicted to knitting and crocheting. We both have really bad procrastination issues, really bad sleep schedules, but we also can like crank and like get an insane amount of stuff done at the last minute when we have to. And she had been diagnosed with ADHD for years, and she met me and she was like, girl, you don't see it, but what you are experiencing is not normal. She has like a long-term boyfriend. Oh, they're engaged now, fiance, whatever. The three of us would hang out and he'd be like, the things you do are like the exact same as her, like the ADHD behaviors. Like, one thing which I honestly didn't even notice that I did, but you know when you're like talking to someone and naturally the conversation, like the topic kind of like diverges and changes to something else? I will say something about a topic from like 5-10 minutes ago without like calling out the fact that I'm circling back to that topic. But in my mind, I don't even think to do that, because I'm like, well, you remember we were talking about that, so let me just circle back to that really quickly, people in conversation with me will be like, wait, what are you talking about? And I have to like retrace my steps. Not even like the last podcast episode, just in my normal YouTube videos, people have commented about ADHD because I'll be like talking about my sweater and then I'll like start talking about like some tea I'm drinking or like some lip product, but I'm always able to like retrace right back to what I was saying with the sweater. But yeah, I think before I met her, like I was definitely kind of like gaslighting myself out of thinking there's anything wrong with me. And I just was like, so many people are like overdiagnosing or like, you know, just saying they have ADHD when they like don't even know what they're talking about. So while it's not the same thing as a formal diagnosis, having someone who like has ADHD and knows about it saying like, you are exemplifying all the behaviors that I struggled with before I got diagnosed, I'm like, okay, that makes me feel like this isn't, you know, I'm not just like pulling this out of my ass. This was also around the time I finished my 2 years at Goldman and I went to this like buy-side firm, like private equity. Again, if you want like a freaking breakdown of my entire career path, you can watch this video from a year ago. I kind of talk about my whole career journey. This is where I started to struggle with a different level of like task immobility. Because for context, I took this job because I didn't think I was going to get it. It was a really prestigious company and I knew I was like, oh, I'm going to learn a lot. I'll get good rec letters and like go get my MBA. Like I was still committed to this like very traditional path out of banking. I was like dreading the job because it wasn't like anything that I wanted to do, but I was like, oh, it doesn't matter if I want to do it. Like I've gone through so many years of academic rigor. I just have to like get through it and it'll be good for me. That was probably like the first sort of job or like, I don't know, gig situation where I was doing something that I truly was not like intrinsically motivated to do. Because even though like I didn't like studying and I didn't like school, like I cared so much about getting good grades and I really saw value in it. And like at Goldman, I really, really wanted to perform well. But I was also just like very burnt out and like my mental health was in a really bad place after like, you know, overworking myself for 2 years. I started struggling not just with procrastination, but like being able to do things at all. And this is also like a new job. I think at GS, by the time my like procrastination problems kicked in, I already had my footing at the company and I like knew how to do things. So it was just a matter of like getting it done. But this was a new company where like I had to like figure things out. And also, you know, it was a more senior role. Like I wasn't just an analyst. I was being asked to do stuff where it wasn't just like plug and chug or like no one was going to teach me. Like I had to like build things from scratch and like be a self-starter. And the thing is, I am completely capable of that. I actually think I'm very good at like figuring things out, not having to have my hand held, like using the resources that I do have around me. When it was something that like I didn't care to do and I was being asked to like learn something new or figure something out, I literally could not do it. It wasn't even about procrastination anymore. I like could not bring myself to like build a model or like do these tasks I was being asked to do. This is like where I really started to experience like the relationship between depression and ADHD. Don't quote me on this, but I feel like they are both related to dopamine, right? And I talked a little bit about dopamine in my dopamine menu episode, but it's like the motivation chemical. With ADHD and depression, those are both situations or like disorders where you are really struggling to like have the motivation to do things. And I feel like they go so hand in hand and like can really form a positive feedback loop, because what I was like struggling with was, you know, I wouldn't be able to do this task and I'd be spiraling about it. It gave me a lot of stress. It also really affected my self-esteem because this was like the first time that I was like, you know, a student or like an employee. And I knew I was capable of being a high performer, but I wasn't performing. And I talked about this in the last episode. I think at my core, I am a hard worker and a high performer, and I like working towards something and being motivated. And so not doing a good job at my job was so bad for my self-esteem and like made me really, really depressed. And then the more depressed I got, the harder it was for me to do things. And the harder it was for me to do things, the more depressed I got. It all just quickly became this rapid downward spiral that, I mean, eventually ended in me like leaving the company and leaving finance entirely. So one could say a sizable spiral. And at the time I had like not a psychiatrist, a psych MP, and she was the one who like diagnosed me with depression. And I mentioned, I was like, oh, but I also like want to think about getting an ADHD diagnosis. And she was like, well, a lot of the symptoms of like ADHD and depression are the same. So it might be kind of hard to tell if you have it because you're also depressed. And I was like, fucking awesome. Like my brain chemistry is really just cooked, huh? So I think that's why like I didn't get a diagnosis even back when I like had the health insurance coverage that would probably cover it. Anyway, after I left finance, I had two other kind of like corporate jobs before I started doing content full time. And they were both like startups. So I wasn't dealing with like the same level of task immobility that I had in private equity. I mean, I've never experienced that level since then, but I was definitely being given more like unstructured tasks that again required me to like figure stuff out. I was still like having a lot of trouble doing that and like still like staying up late and procrastinating and like, you know, working hours that I shouldn't have had to work. I mean, I think that's like probably one of the biggest perks of doing content full time is I don't have to deal with that spiral. I definitely procrastinate editing sometimes, but like wanting to, you know, literally bang my head against the wall, just feeling like I am incapable of doing anything my brain wants me to do, that I don't feel like I have struggled with to like an extreme degree in the past year, which is something that I am so deeply grateful for. Okay, and another thing that's funny, I have mentioned a few times in this video, right? Like, oh, I was around a lot of academic overachievers, a lot of undiagnosed ADHD. I was around investment bankers, a lot of undiagnosed ADHD. Someone needs to study, I mean, maybe it's been studied, but someone needs to study the link between like a fiber arts, like crochet knitting addiction and ADHD, because I obviously know a bunch of fiber arts content creators, and I feel like if you're a content creator, you're not just like someone who crochets or knits, you're someone who like is obsessed with it and does a lot of it and loves it and is probably addicted to it in a different kind of way. I'm on a lot of their like close friends stories, so even if they're not like my IRL friends, like I know about them. And I genuinely think like at least 65% of them have diagnosed ADHD. Okay, I actually read somewhere, I couldn't find it anymore, but I read somewhere that they were using like crocheting and knitting, like teaching it to young kids with ADHD sort of like as a treatment. And I'm like, is that a treatment or are you just like setting them up for a lifelong addiction? I mean, I guess there are worse addictions to have, like heroin. But I do think it's not a coincidence that so many people who like have a knitting addiction also have ADHD. I want to do like a full-blown episode on knitting and crocheting as kind of an alternative to modern doom scrolling. One big thing, I don't know if anyone can relate to this, if I do nothing with my hands, it's kind of hard for me to focus. Like, it's hard for me to like watch TV and not also be doing something else. And it seems like a little counterintuitive, but I feel like my brain is moving a million miles an hour and there's so much going on. If you just want me to like listen to a lecture or like watch an episode, I feel a bit too untethered and my brain can go so many places. Whereas if I am crocheting, it takes maybe like, let's say like 10% of my focus. But ironically, it kind of like anchors me so that I can like stay more grounded. I like did crochet and knit in some classes in college, and in hindsight I wish I did it more. Like back then I wasn't doing content or anything, and so crocheting and knitting was just like not a huge part of my life, but I feel like it would have really helped me like focus more on lectures. I feel like the flip side of that is that I think another common like ADHD thing is like, oh, hyperfixating on your hobbies. I do think like crocheting and knitting for me is like genuinely an addiction. When I start doing it, because, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'll just like knit a few rows like before bed. It's like what, like 11 p.m. And the number of times I've accidentally continued doing it until like 4 a.m. And this is something I think I've also noticed is like, I don't normally struggle with like switching tasks. I wouldn't say that's like a big problem in my life. But I do have this certain like inertia where if I start doing something, if there's nothing external, okay, I'm trying to think of an example. Like when I'm in California and I park my car in the driveway, if I don't immediately walk into the house, like if I like open my phone and start doing something, I will accidentally sit in the car for like 2 hours and then I won't go back home until I need to like use the restroom. Or like my dad will be on a run and he'll come home and be like, wait, why are you like sitting in your car? Like you got back like hours ago. Or I'll like sit down on the stairs, like in my parents' house, just like on my way downstairs because I like need to reply to an email or something. And then I'll accidentally sit there for hours. And I feel like the same thing happens with crocheting and knitting. And it's funny because I was like complaining in the last episode. I was like, oh, my flow state is like disturbed because I have to constantly stop to like film content. Like, oh, I hit this benchmark in the sweater. I can't keep going until I show the camera. But now that I'm thinking about it, that honestly might be a blessing in disguise for me because it like forces me to stop a project at like certain points. Otherwise, like I would literally just like stay up until the sweater was done and there'd be like nothing to stop me from doing that. I don't know. I don't think it's intentional, but I, in general, do surround myself with people who are similar to me. And I feel like I have found myself in a lot of like environments or communities where people struggle with similar things. And it's just made it easy for me to feel like it's normal because other people are just also not normal in a similar way. And okay, not to sound like a boomer, but I do think growing up in like the glued to your phone, social media addiction era, our dopamine receptors are just like absolutely fried. Like we are so used to having endless entertainment, food, sex, whatever, all those kind of traditional providers of pleasure just at our disposal, like at our fingertips all the time. Like obviously it is way easier to like distract yourself and get sidetracked and not do what you have to do when you have like endless TV and movies and conversations and scrolling just on your phone. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you like gave me no phone and like no internet and told me to work on something, I would absolutely still find a way to not do it. But it is like a lot easier to get sidetracked or to just like turn your brain off and, you know, like doom scroll. I do think that like these kind of ADHD behaviors or symptoms are like a lot more common in the population in general because of that. Like our attention span is just shorter and we're like so used to just like a million things happening at once. And it makes it a lot harder to just like focus on what's in front of you. It was really interesting to me, I think, to realize that like ADHD is less so about your ability to focus and more so that like you focus on things 0% or like 100%. My friend was like explaining to me, she was like, I feel like normal people, like they have like 60 to 70% focus on something, but people with ADHD either like cannot be clued in or are like hyper clued in. And that's something I definitely related to because I feel like, you know, when you're on a Zoom call and you like kind of space out, like for me, either I'm listening to every single word and I'll remember all of it, or I genuinely could not even tell you what was being talked about. Like I know it's been like apparently scientifically proven that people can't truly multitask, but I do feel like some people are able to like give something partial focus, whereas I'm like either clued in or I'm just completely out of it. And I actually mentioned this in my amigurumi video that like my nickname that my family calls me, like no one calls me by my Chinese name. They call me Mal or Maldai. And when I was like really young, my mom genuinely thought that like something was wrong with me because I was just like really spaced out and like really unresponsive. And she was like crying about it. My dad would be like, she's probably fine. Don't worry about it. And so they used to call me Daizi, which like, I mean, like Fatai means like, you know, you're just like spacing out. But Daizi technically means like you're an idiot, which is a very flattering nickname. And then my grandpa, like my mom's dad, got mad at her and was like, what are you doing like calling your kid that? So then he added Mal, which like for his area of China, it technically means like fuzz, but or like hair, but it can also be like a cute thing to call like a kid. So then my nickname was like baby idiot. And I think I still do this now though, where like I will just be like completely glazed over in the eyes and people will ask what I'm thinking about and I'm like, does everyone else's brain not constantly have like 4 million thoughts going on? I have some friends where they'll look like that. They'll be kind of spaced out. I'm like, what are you thinking about? And they're like, oh, nothing. And I'm like, what do you mean nothing? I have never been thinking about nothing. And this is why like everyone tells me I need to meditate and I'm sure it would be highly helpful for me, but it's also really, really difficult for me. Because what do you mean silence my brain? My brain can't be silenced. And this is like why I also struggle with like falling asleep because once I lie down and I have like no external things going on, it's my brain almost like instead of quieting down, I feel like it comes alive. And like suddenly I'm just thinking about everything under the sun and then I like become more awake. I don't know. That's something I've been struggling with like more as I get older, but I guess that's something that like just happens. You get old and suddenly we all have freaking insomnia and are taking melatonin and magnesium. But I guess I should like get back to the main question, which is like, do I have ADHD? Well, I told you I don't have an answer to that. I'm not going to have an answer until I go get a diagnosis. But I think like the reason I haven't prioritized that is because I know a lot of people with diagnosed ADHD, and I know a lot of people who like have gotten medicated for or like gotten a prescription for Adderall, tried it. All the women I know, like none of them take Adderall consistently. Almost all of them, they take it when they need it, but they don't take it every day because they don't like certain side effects. Like one of my friends mentioned, she was like, oh, it like slows down my brain and that makes me feel like really depressed and sad and slow. And I'm like, okay, I already struggle with depression, so that doesn't sound appealing. I've also heard friends say like it makes them feel like a little bit robotic and like emotionally dead. Interestingly enough, a lot of the guys I know who have ADHD like take their Adderall every day. I don't know if that's just because like women are like more in tune with themselves and like are more aware of the side effects, or I don't know, my sample size isn't that big, so I'm not gonna like conjecture too much. But I kind of got the impression that if I were to get a diagnosis, get a prescription, I probably would only take Adderall if I needed it. I think if I were to go back to corporate, I would absolutely go down that route because I think I would still really, really struggle in a corporate job with like task immobility and procrastination and like not being able to do things I don't want to do, because I just don't think I'll be able to find a corporate job where like I really want to do everything that's asked of me. But right now, like with my job, I'm so fortunate as to like not struggle with that as much. It's not like it definitely makes like my work schedule and sleep schedule a little funky, but it's not like severely reducing my quality of life. So health insurance situation aside, it doesn't feel like a priority to me to like figure that out right now. The reason I wanted to talk about this, besides just like rambling and addressing something that I get a lot of comments about, is because I feel like there are probably some of you out there, especially if you love crocheting and knitting a lot, who also might be younger and might like be struggling with similar things and like be beating yourself up about it. And I think if it's something that you really struggle with like to an extreme degree, it's entirely possible like it's not your fault, and you just need to like go down the route and explore if like maybe you do have ADD, ADHD, some sort of like neurodivergence. Because honestly, like even though I'm not getting a diagnosis or like getting treated right now, like realizing that something might be wrong with me, like that's not my fault, was I think what made the biggest difference for me. It's just recognizing like, oh, this is not just like you being a piece of shit or you not being disciplined. There is something going on in your brain that's maybe not normal, and there is a reason that like other people don't struggle with this and you do, you know? So if you like relate to any of this stuff, just maybe talk to a mental health professional. Don't like start Googling random stuff or like watching TikToks, even though that's how I got my information, because yeah, you should talk to an actual doctor. This was today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Bye guys. Oh, I will put the yarn I'm using down below. And this is a sweater that I'm currently writing a pattern for, so don't ask me about it. There will be a pattern, okay? Trust. All right, that's all. Love you guys. Bye.
You left the kitchen light on and it's 2 to go to there. It's better